What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Bush coming at you solo today to bring you the Week 14 wide receiver rankings. As I talked about yesterday, I'm doing something a little bit different going forward. I got a little sick of going through game by game and talking about each wide receiver matchup and things like that I was doing in weeks past. The old format was getting a little stale for me. So now that our rankings are free, which you can get in the description right now, I'm going to basically just be going over my top 32 wide receiver rankings for Week 14 in this video. Still going to go over wide receiver cornerback matchups as usual because I know you guys really enjoy that. If you guys enjoy this video at any point, please hit the like button, comment any of your thoughts down below, and subscribe to the channel if you are new. We're going to hit the intro and then we're going to get right into this. Okay, so as always, you guys should be able to see the wide receiver matchups chart on the screen right now. I will leave this on the screen throughout the entirety of the video. If you want a bigger view of it, you can follow me on Twitter at FootballStock. I tweeted it out this morning. So without further ado, let's get into wide receivers 1 through 8. And I'm going to go through my top 8, then 9 to 16, 17 to 24, and then 25 to 32 throughout this video. Kind of go, in depth on each guy, talk about wide receiver cornerback matchups, trends, usage, etc. So we're going to start with my wide receiver 1 on the week, Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill is facing the Las Vegas Raiders this week. He went 7 for 83 and 2 touchdowns earlier this season. Also went 11 for 102 and 2 touchdowns last season against the Raiders. They just don't really know how to defend this guy, which is why I really like Tyreek this week. Tyreek faces Nate Hobbs in coverage, as you guys can see on the screen, who is allowing an 84% catch percentage. Also doesn't really have the speed to keep up with a guy like Tyreek Hill. He ran a 4.55 at his pro day, so Tyreek Hill could definitely get behind him in this one. The Raiders play a lot of cover 3 defense, a lot of single high, which usually doesn't end well against the Kansas City Chiefs offense. So I could foresee a big time Tyreek Hill game incoming this week. He is my wide receiver 1 on the week. Wide receiver 2, of course, Cooper Kupp. He has a tougher matchup. The Cardinals are only allowing 137 yards to wide receiver cores, so all wide receivers per game this season. So production might be few and far between for the wide receiver core of Los Angeles in general. But what I like about Cooper Kupp this week, obviously, is the target share. You can't not like the target share. But Byron Murphy has been pretty stingy in coverage, only allowing a 60% catch percentage. So could be a bit of a down Cooper Kupp game. Maybe he doesn't, go fucking 7 for 155 and a touchdown in this game. Maybe he just has a modest 95 yards and a touchdown or something like that. That's basically what we've gotten used to with Cooper Kupp at this point. He is an absolute stud, of course, in your lineup. Justin Jefferson, obviously, he was my wide receiver 3 on the week. We saw him play last night. Literally had 3 end zone targets. Could have had a 3 touchdown game last night. Could have went for an absolutely monster stat line, but still a great performance. 15 targets, 7 catches, 79 yards, and a touchdown. Moving on to my wide receiver 4 on the week is Davante Adams. Davante Adams could also be in for a tougher matchup similar to Cooper Kupp because PFF does expect Jalen Johnson to shadow cover Davante Adams in this game. And last time the Bears and Packers played, that was the infamous Aaron Rodgers, I own you quote or whatever when he ran into the end zone. Adams was only held to 4 for 89 and 0 stat line basically by Jalen Johnson. They moved Davante Adams around quite a bit, and he's good enough, obviously, that you shouldn't have to worry about cornerback matchups for him, but it is worth noting that he doesn't have a smash matchup in this one, for example. So might be a modest, 6 for 105 and no touchdown type of game for Davante Adams. Unfortunately, for those of you guys that need a big game out of him, as you guys can see on the screen, Jalen Johnson is allowing a 57% catch percentage, which is pretty good. Only 0.25 fantasy points per route run, and also 1.06 yards per route covered, which is basically the cornerback version of yards per route run. So he has been very good this year. But again, Davante Adams should be good enough to get the best of him if he needs to. Number 5 on the list is Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson, of course, also played last night, 5 for 76 and no touchdowns, but he did score a 2-point conversion. Definitely could have been better. But like I said, he did play last night. So moving on to wide receiver 6, Keenan Allen is a huge question mark for sure. But if he plays, this is where he would settle in to my rankings as of right now. He tested positive for COVID-19 earlier in the week, I believe on Monday. Reports are that he is vaccinated according to NFL Network and some reputable sources. So he can test negative today, can test negative tomorrow, and still play. Going to treat it basically like he's playing right now because it does sound like between him and Mike Williams, he is the more likely player to play. And we can probably expect if Mike Williams is out and Keenan Allen is playing, that James Bradbury will probably shadow cover Keenan Allen in this game. So not a great matchup for him overall, but still he's Keenan Allen. He gets 10 plus targets per game, and the Chargers are expected to put up a lot of points in this one. So not overly worried about that. CeeDee Lamb, number 7 on the list. They use CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, and Michael Gallup interchangeably. So I'm not even going to show you guys the wide receiver cornerback matchups for those guys because there's really no trend. They all see about 20 snaps per game on each cornerback every game that they play. So there's really no point of talking about it. They will all see William Jackson. They'll all see Kendall Fuller, and they'll all see Danny Johnson. Washington is one of the worst defenses in the NFL against fantasy wide receivers. So I like all 3 of these Cowboys wide receivers this week, but particularly CeeDee Lamb because he has been the highest target getter of the offense, and I think he's probably the most talented of all these guys as well. Number 8 on the list is Deebo Samuel. Much like Keenan Allen, he is also a question mark on whether or not he's playing. If he does play, this is where he slots in for me. The only reason I think there's a chance that he could play this Sunday, because, he hasn't practiced Wednesday, didn't practice Thursday. We haven't gotten the practice report yet on Friday, but Shanahan did say he was optimistic that he could practice today, and he's optimistic that he could play on Sunday. So if he does play, he should see a lot of work both in the passing game and on the ground, because it doesn't sound like Elijah Mitchell will be playing. And if Elijah Mitchell is out, we saw last time Elijah Mitchell didn't play. Deebo Samuel carried the ball like 6 or 8 times in that game and also got some targets as well. So Deebo Samuel, of course, if Elijah Mitchell is out and Deebo Samuel is in, should be at the top in the top 8 of my wide receivers as I have them listed right now. Moving on from the top 8 wide receivers, let's get into the 9 to 16 range. We have Stephon Diggs at wide receiver 9 right now. Diggs will probably get the Carlton Davis treatment in this game, which is why I have him a little bit lower. And of course, if Keenan Allen and Deebo Samuel don't play, he obviously moves up into my top 8 wide receivers this week. But the Bucs secondary is a lot better right now than it has been throughout the season. So you can kind of just like throw out the stats for the Bucs secondary in terms of what they're giving up to wide receivers throughout the season, because they've had none of their starting corners for most of the year, except for now. Right now, they have Carlton Davis back healthy, hasn't played since week 4. Jamel Dean has been in and out of the lineup throughout the season. And then Sean Murphy-Bunting hasn't played since week 1 up until, he played 2 games ago, last game, and now this game coming up, but he missed like 8 weeks of the season as well. So these guys are a lot more equipped to stop the pass, stop Josh Allen and the Bills passing game. The defenses could steal the show in this game. This is expected to be the shootout game of the week. It's expected to be very chalky in DFS to play players from this game, but it wouldn't shock me if the defenses held this one to a low-scoring game, because both defenses are capable of doing that. Still, Stephon Diggs is an auto start in this game, just a bit downgraded because Carlton Davis, as you guys can see there, has held opposing wide receivers this season to a 53% catch percentage, and his numbers last year were even better than that. So I'm expecting Stephon Diggs probably to not have the greatest game in this one. Moving on to number 10, Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins basically flipped roles in recent weeks. Before, when we were talking about Jamar Chase all for the first 8 weeks of the season, it was T. Higgins is getting great usage, but Jamar Chase is scoring all the touchdowns. He's creating all the big plays and not producing. But now Jamar Chase is the guy that is doing that, which is really, really weird. Jamar Chase has the elite ceiling that can win you a week in DFS, or can win you a week in your season-long league. So he is in my lineup no matter what. As you guys can see on the screen, Jamar Chase is expected to see Josh Norman in coverage. And if you guys read my DFS article last week, I talked about why I like DK Metcalf, because Josh Norman ran a 4.6 240 at his combine nearly 10 years ago. So Jamar Chase could beat him deep for a long touchdown in this one. Would not shock me if Jamar Chase has a monster game in this one. It has been a couple weeks since Jamar Chase has made a big impact, and I think he could get back on track in this game. Number 11 and number 12 are both from the same team, so I'll kind of just lump them together. Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. They don't have it extremely easy this week. This game is supposed to be high scoring, and these guys are largely matchup proof because of how fast of a pace of the offense that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers run, and of course how good of receivers that they are and good of a quarterback that Tom Brady is, and how much they pass the ball. But Teron Johnson in the slot against Chris Godwin, he's only allowing a 53% catch percentage, and that's not ideal, obviously, but he is allowing very few catches over the middle. And these guys, like I said, they're largely matchup proof, but the Bills safeties make it tough for Evans to catch a long touchdown, even with Tre'Davious White out of this game. So I would have these guys a lot higher. I just tend to think that the Bills defense and the Bucs defense are not just going to roll over and allow a huge shootout in this game. I think that they're probably going to keep this one a little bit lower scoring than the over-under might anticipate. I think it's at 52.5 or something like right now. So if you guys are betting this game, I would probably take the under. I think the defenses are better than they're being given credit for. So number 13, Pretty similar rationale to Jamar Chase. DK Metcalf was close to having a bigger game last week. He was actually tackled at the 2-yard line. His usage has been very good. Russ has looked a lot better. And I love Metcalf again in DFS. For those of you guys that are playing DFS this week, DK Metcalf has a size and speed advantage again against his corner and coverage, Desmond King. Desmond King is 5 inches shorter than DK Metcalf and runs 0.2 of a second slower than DK Metcalf. So I really like DK Metcalf to be able to produce a big game in this one. Again, he is a very, very good tournament play for those of you guys that are playing DFS, because people are going to be scared off of the Seahawks offense, even despite a pretty solid performance from Russell Wilson and the Seahawks scoring 30 points last week. So Marquise Brown, number 14 on the list. He broke a 4-game streak this past week of double-digit targets, still averaging 9 targets per game on the season, though. And this stretch of down games for Marquise Brown, he's had 3 straight games, I believe, in the last couple of weeks where he hasn't exceeded 60 receiving yards, but he's still getting the targets. He's still averaging like 30 targets over that 3-game stretch, and it will correct itself eventually. So again, another DFS guy that I really like this week. Marquise Brown is expected to face Greg Newsome in coverage, and Greg Newsome is, a pretty similar stature player to what Marquise Brown is. So I'd imagine they could probably stick with each other. And Greg Newsome did obviously hold him to not a very good game a couple weeks ago before the bye week when Marquise Brown played the Cleveland Browns on Sunday night. So this game definitely a bit of an enigma based on what we saw in week 12, but I'm expecting Marquise Brown to probably get back on track in this one. I don't expect this guy to continue to get double-digit targets and not produce on them. So I really like him this week as a top 15 play and a good tournament play for those of you guys that are playing DFS. Number 15, DJ Moore. I have DJ Moore a fair amount higher than where experts have him this week. DJ Moore currently has 0 games on the entire season with less than 7 targets, and he averages 9.3 targets per game on the season as well. Similar to Marquise Brown, if Cam Newton can figure his shit out and actually play like a functional NFL quarterback, DJ Moore should be able to produce. We saw DJ Moore produce before the bye week against the Dolphins, had over 100 yards. We saw him produce against Washington in Cam Newton's first game where he got into the end zone. I think DJ Moore should be in for a pretty solid one. He does have AJ Terrell in coverage, who has been pretty good this year, but not expected to be a shadow matchup. DJ Moore has moved around quite a bit. He should see a lot of Fabian Moreau as well. So anytime he's off of AJ Terrell, who's been very good this season, I expect him to be able to produce in this game. So let's get to wide receiver 16, and then we'll get into the back end wide receiver 2s. Amari Cooper is my wide receiver 16. He is, quote, likely ready for a full workload. So basically what we saw on Thursday night, he was kind of eased back in coming off of the COVID list. I guess he was still sick or something. I'm not really sure why they eased him back in, but he's back to a full workload this Sunday, according to the Cowboys coaching staff. This presents a really great spot for him, obviously, like it does for Lamb. As I talked about already, Washington is vulnerable all over the secondary, and against fantasy wide receivers specifically, they've had games where they've looked like a great defense in recent weeks where they've played some tough games against the Raiders and against the Seahawks, but Dallas is a good enough offense that I don't think they should have any problem taking advantage of the Washington defense and that style of play that the Washington football team has been playing in recent weeks. And I can kind of transition this into the next guy that we're going to talk about, wide receiver 17, Terry McLaurin. He's kind of been a victim of his passing game being inconsistent, and the fact that they haven't had to throw the ball a whole lot. They've been gutting out close wins against Las Vegas and against Seattle, where they've only scored like 15 points. I doubt they can deploy that formula this week against Dallas. I think Dallas is going to put up points in this game. Terry McLaurin is probably going to get a lot more targets than we're used to seeing because they're going to have to throw quite a bit more. And I'm expecting the Trayvon Diggs treatment for Terry McLaurin, but I think Terry McLaurin can handle him just fine. In Trayvon Diggs' rookie year last year, Terry McLaurin burnt him for a long touchdown. I think he should be able to get the job done in this game. Wide receiver 18, T. Higgins. We already kind of talked about Jamar Chase. He's basically the polar opposite. Like I said, 2 big weeks in a row for T. Higgins, 22 targets, 250 yards, and 2 touchdowns in the last 2 games. It's a juicy matchup again for him. He's expected to see Ambry Thomas in coverage, who is somehow not ahead of Demondor Lenore, who's been horrible this year on the depth chart. He got injured in that game. So Ambry Thomas is probably coming up from the practice squad or something like that to defend T. Higgins, which again is not going to end well for him. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Joe Burrow is a stack I absolutely love in DFS this week because Joe Mixon, as we just heard recently, as I'm recording this, Joe Mixon is expected to be a game time decision with the illness that he's dealing with. So I really like the passing game for the Bengals in this one against San Francisco. Number 19 is DeAndre Hopkins. It feels weird to have DeAndre Hopkins this low, but even though Kyler only threw 11 times last week in the weather, I'm willing to toss that game out. I don't think it has a huge impact on my view of any of the pass catchers or Kyler Murray, but it is weird having DeAndre Hopkins this low, but it's warranted because until I see target hog DeAndre Hopkins, I can't put him higher than this. 0 games this year with 10 plus targets and only 4 of 9 games where he's had 7 or more targets. So Christian Kirk, Rondale Moore, AJ Green, Zach Ertz, all these guys are eating into DeAndre Hopkins' target share. We're not seeing the 30% target share DeAndre Hopkins that we saw last year and that we've seen in his Houston days. This is a guy that is a 22% target share guy on the season. And not only that, but he is likely going to get the Jalen Ramsey treatment this week. And that makes me a little less confident that he's going to produce at a high level. So I have him at 19. I don't think he's an absolute must start this week. I think if you have some of the guys that I've talked about already, Amari Cooper, T. Higgins, Terry McLaurin, I do think you can start them over a guy like DeAndre Hopkins this week. Christian Kirk, as you guys can see there, has Deontay Dion in coverage. Maybe he's the guy that produces this week for the Cardinals passing game. Number 20 is Mike Williams, and he's probably going to be out this week. So you could probably just, throw this analysis away, but he is unvaxxed. He is a close contact of Keenan Allen, but he hasn't tested positive yet, which means he has a chance of playing still. And he should slot into this range if he does play at wide receiver 20. They have an okay matchup against the Giants. The Giants aren't going to move the ball a whole lot on offense. You could probably figure that the Chargers will have the ball a lot on their offensive side of the ball. So Mike Williams, if he does play, inside my top 20 for the week, but again, he is unvaxxed. If he does test positive, he's definitely going to be out this week and maybe even next week as well. So number 21 still blows my mind how Cordero Patterson isn't on the field every play for the Falcons, but I have him at wide receiver 21 for the week. I did talk about him yesterday as a running back because that's kind of just how I view him. But this is where he slots in among wide receivers if you have this kind of choice to make. Number 22 is Tyler Lockett. He scored his first touchdown last week since week 2. He scored 3 touchdowns in the first 3 games of this, or the first 2 games of the season, but hadn't scored since then. The Seahawks pass catchers have a great spot this week, as I kind of already talked about for Metcalf. I'm actually semi-confident in trusting them again with Tyler Lockett going up against Terrace Mitchell in the slot. Again, you guys can see he has a pretty bad PFF grade. Tyler Lockett should have a pretty big advantage in that one. So I have no problem trusting Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, both as top 24 wide receivers on the week. Number 23, again, we don't really know if this guy's going to play or not. I'd expect him actually not to play, but Elijah Moore at 23 this week. He hasn't practiced the last 2 days, which puts his status for sure in doubt on Sunday. The Athletics' Connor Hughes actually went out of his way to say that he's unlikely to play on Sunday. In his absence, Jamison Crowder probably slides up to a top 36 play at wide receiver. Of course, Corey Davis is not healthy either. He is on season-ending IR with core muscle surgery. If he does go Elijah Moore, then I expect the Marshawn Lattimore treatment for him. But again, it doesn't sound like he's going to play, although he hasn't been officially ruled out quite yet. Number 24, Hunter Renfrow. He's gone over 100 yards or scored a touchdown in 4 of his last 5 games. He has to be in your lineup this week. Wide receiver 22 in points per game this year. Pretty solid considering where you got him. You might have even picked him up on waivers at some point this season, and he's been very, very consistent. Like I said, 22 in points per game, 19 overall in PPR leagues. He is expected to see L'Jarius Sneed in coverage, who, is a good corner, but L'Jarius Sneed is much more of the takeaway corner, more so than the lockdown coverage guy. So I expect Hunter Renfrow to do some damage against him. He's allowing a 76% catch rate and 1.35 yards per route covered in his coverage. And of course, Hunter Renfrow's played very well this season. So I really like Hunter Renfrow this week as a top 24 guy. Now let's get into wide receivers 25 through 32, and then I'll close this video out. Darnell Mooney is my wide receiver 25 on the week. The most recent news that we have is that Allen Robinson is going to make his return this week. With Fields back, though, I'm still willing to trust Darnell Mooney due to his strong play in recent weeks. Again, I'm just willing to throw out the window what happened last week in that bad weather game. So Darnell Mooney, a guy that I'm absolutely willing to trust this week. He is facing Shandon Sullivan and Eric Stokes in coverage. And again, he's been commanding targets. He's been getting open, and Justin Fields and him seem to have a pretty good connection. Number 26, Chase Claypool. He already played yesterday, so not much to talk about. Sick first down, Selly, though, when you were trying to preserve the clock. I don't know what the fuck he was doing there, but nonetheless had a pretty solid game. 27, Brandon Cooks. Target share has been inconsistent recently, but we did get word today, in fact, that David Culley says that Davis Mills is starting this game. Not only that, but he's starting the rest of the season. And we did see Brandon Cooks' target share a lot more consistent when Davis Mills was in the lineup. And Brandon Cooks is expected to see DJ Reed and Sidney Jones in coverage, who have actually been pretty solid this year. And the Seahawks in general have actually been pretty solid against wide receivers. They're much more beatable on the ground than they are through the air. But again, with Davis Mills starting this game, I actually do like Brandon Cooks as a top 30 wide receiver. Number 28, Michael Gallup. Again, just copy and paste every point I said for Amari Cooper and for CeeDee Lamb. Moving on to 29 and 32 also, Van Jefferson and Odell Beckham Jr., they're both in a decent spot this week. Like I already mentioned, for Cooper Kupp, he does have the hardest matchup on the field. Of course, he is the best receiver on the team, but he does have the hardest matchup on the field. And the weak link of the Cardinals secondary, Marco Wilson, is expected to split time between Van Jefferson and Odell Beckham Jr. on the outside. And Odell Beckham Jr. didn't play the biggest role last week, but that was likely due to his hip injury. Only ran 59% of the routes, should be back to normal this week. So if you need a flex play, I really like Odell Beckham and Van Jefferson this week. Number 30 on the list is Brandon Ayuk. He was mega chalk last week with no Deebo Samuel in the lineup. Everybody played this guy in DFS. Maybe without Deebo Samuel again, but a much better matchup this week. So I actually do like Brandon Ayuk if you guys need him. Expected to see Chidobe Awuzie in coverage and also Eli Apple on the outside. Like I said, with Deebo Samuel questionable for this game and also Eli Mitchell questionable for this game, I'm expecting a heavy dose of George Kittle like we saw last week, and also Brandon Ayuk to be a little bit more involved. Like I said, the Seahawks are actually pretty good against fantasy wide receivers, so didn't shock me entirely that Brandon Ayuk had a down game last week. Number 31, and like I said, Odell Beckham is number 32, so I already talked about him. Number 31 is Jerry Jeudy. He's kind of an enigma right now, only a 21% target share in the games that he's played. I kind of expected a lot more out of Jerry Jeudy. He's got an easy pass matchup this week, though, for the first time in a number of weeks. He hasn't played a whole lot of easy matchups the games that he's been on the field. Just not a high volume offense for the Broncos, so it's hard to trust anybody in this offense. Fant, Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, anybody that's not Javonte Williams when Melvin Gordon's out of the lineup has kind of disappointed you if you are invested in this Broncos offense. But like I said, Jerry Jeudy against the Lions secondary should be a matchup that he can take advantage of. So I am willing to start him as a top 32 wide receiver. Now, maybe I didn't talk about the guys that you're deciding between for some of your start sit questions this week. They will be available in the description. Again, week 14 rankings available for free. If you want to see some deeper names that I didn't talk about in this one, while you're down there, please hit the like button, comment any of your thoughts down below, and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Peace out, guys, and I'll talk to you later.